Kick off. Welcome to everyone who's joining us today. It is our final week of the Resilience Challenge series. We have 5 weeks on this now. And if you haven't managed to join us for the last 4 sessions, they're all on our YouTube channel at Juggle Jobs. We've been talking about goals, how to set them, how to stick to them. We've been talking about habits, how to create the good ones, how to break the bad ones. Also what to do when you need to pivot under pressure, when time is of the essence, and all of that to build your resilience. And today we're going to be talking about inner confidence, which is so core to really building resilience. And I'm delighted to have with us, we've got Mica Vaipan, who actually specializes in this topic. She is a coach specializing in helping founders and other, I guess, executives of high growth companies to build their resilience. So really looking forward to listening to Mica on this topic, which is such a specialist on. And we've also got Anouk, who is the founder and CEO of Unleashed. Unleashed are completely rethinking the people function, which historically has been known as human resources, which is a particularly dry way to describe what is essentially the core of your business. So Anouk and her team, we work with some of the most exciting businesses in tech today, and they help them to develop their strategy, putting people at the heart of that. So she's obviously seen multiple founders at all stages of their journey, and resilience, as I understand, is a pretty big topic for you as well. So very excited to talk to you today. If you have any key takeaways as we're talking today, then please do add them on social. Always good to hear from you. Our social channels are at Juggle Jobs, and if you just use the hashtag Resilience Challenge. We will send a summary at the end with all of the discussions of the books that are raised today, so don't worry about making notes. They will be sent to you separately. So just on to the main event, a quick introduction on resilience itself. Like, why did we choose this topic? Juggle Jobs is a flexible working platform for experienced professionals. So what has resilience got to do with us? Well, the truth is it kind of goes to the heart of what our professionals are experiencing on a day-to-day basis, and also the businesses as well. If you are a professional who's decided to work flexibly, chances are that you are going against the norm. Even though flexible working is having its moment in the spotlight today, it is still a departure from how most people are employed. So you would have had to carve out your own path, you would have had to negotiate part-time hours, for example, you would have to hustle a lot more, do more business development, be rejected more. And ultimately, what we've noticed is the people who are the most successful working flexibly tend to be the most resilient as well. So it really does go to the core of what we're doing. And in light of COVID-19, I don't think any businesses, apart from perhaps Zoom and e-commerce type businesses, are doing particularly well. All of those forecasts that we put together at the end of last year, you know, they haven't ended as we wanted them to in this last quarter gone. And that's really tough for companies. They've been letting people go, having really difficult conversations. So again, resilience goes to the heart of everything on our customer side as well. So on to the main event. Anouk, I'm going to start with you. Can you just talk to us about a time when you, I guess, either knew you needed to become more resilient, or maybe when you just discovered you just were resilient as a person?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I can actually pinpoint when I realized I was resilient, and it was 11 years ago. I broke up with my partner at the time. I was living in his sister's house with him and our 2-year-old son. We needed to move out, my son and I, and we found ourselves in a tiny little 1-bedroom flat that was kind of 5 floors up in the attic of an old house. He had the bed in the bedroom, and I was kind of sleeping on the sofa. I was lucky to be working full-time at the time, so I had a job, but my son, I then had feelings of guilt because my son had to be at nursery from kind of 8:30 till 5:30, and I'd carry him up those flights of stairs, and he was exhausted, and we'd have no time together, and it was quite awful. But what happened was I worked really hard, which was good because I was always a hard worker, and I kept on getting promotions and progressing within the business, and therefore getting pay rises. But because I was a single mum, I was also receiving some benefits and allowances from the government. And every time I got a pay rise from the company, the benefits rightly decreased from the government. But it meant actually, in the way that it happened, that I was net worse off every time I got a pay rise and every time I got promoted. So I started using payday loans to get through the month, and then I'd pay that off, and then I'd have to get another payday loan when I got paid again, and so on. And I was really kind of in some depths of despair with all of this. So I decided there and then, actually, that I was never, ever going to be dependent on anyone or anything kind of again. And so I actually ended up starting, which didn't help my guilt, but starting a part-time master's degree as well, because I thought if I learn more skills, get more knowledge, get qualified further, then that's going to help me. And I did. I kept progressing, and I kept growing. And that was really, really helpful. And as a result, from finding that strength to never want to be dependent again, and it wasn't putting walls up, it was just finding a strength within me to keep going forward and to kind of come back from this despair, I realized that I was actually really strong and really resilient, and I had that bounce back ability that I like to think of when I talk about resilience. So yes, 11 years ago is when I can pinpoint that happened.
That's such an inspiring story. I love how you almost just turned it on its head, looked at that hardship and thought, actually, I'm going to become more skilled. So this doesn't happen to me again, but I'm going to be stronger if something like this ever happens to me again, which goes to the core of what resilience is all about. Mica, you and I have had lots of conversations in the past about your experiences in some really high growth, amazing startups, including Graze, and your life in investment banking as well. But that taught you, I know, a lot about resilience and on the path that you're on now. Can you just talk to us a little bit about that experience and how that shaped why you were interested in speaking today? I'm going to unmute you now.
Yeah, it's funny because I guess when I look back and when I look at where I am today, and for my focus on well-being, I really didn't start as someone focused on well-being. In fact, quite the opposite. As you mentioned, I studied economics at Cambridge. I then went into investment banking, and then I spent about a decade in startups. And so I was head of data at Grace, and then the CEO at Bisbee. And so in a way, what got me here in terms of my focus on well-being was actually the combination of being high achieving, but actually unknowingly having a very limited capacity to harness stress, if that makes sense. So although I thought I was resilient, I was ending up in kind of burnout situations continuously. So I was giving so much of myself to those roles that there was nothing left of me. So in over a decade of kind of high pressure roles, I had multiple burnouts with actually significant consequences on my physical and emotional health, which was why I decided to take a step back and really get to grips with what stress was all about. And, I felt that I needed to do that because I realized that the more things I was going to have in life that I cared about, a company, a family, children eventually, like Anouk is saying, the more stress was going to be part of my life. And in a way, I was like, right, if I wasn't ready to accept what my GP was telling me, which was, oh, just rest, just take some time off, which was so disempowering. And bless her, she's this amazing lady. So I had to find another way. And actually, that's kind of in a way what got me here. And I look back, and in a way, you can leverage all those past experiences. And although I did go through a number of kind of burnouts, I can look back and leverage a lot of those experiences to build my resilience today. So not all is lost in a way.
Brilliant, thank you. Another very inspiring story. Right, so I'm going to get straight onto the topic in hand today, which is all about building inner confidence. And it flows on a bit from the topic that we had last week, which is about tuning out that negative voice and tuning into the positive one, so we can start building that core ourselves. Anouk, can you share with us perhaps your maybe top 3 tools and techniques that you have honed or perhaps advised others on how to build that inner confidence and tune into that positive voice?
Oh, I'm back, sorry. You're muted though. Okay, so there are actually three things: reframing, learning by experience, and mottos. And I'll just give you just a little bit of insight on each of those. Reframing for me is probably about forcefully looking for the positive in something, because it's always there and it can be really hard to see. So for example, when it was just me and my son, seeing it as an opportunity to build a future together, and we had the opportunity to decide what we wanted that future to look like. And therefore, in that, we could build it the way that we wanted and do what we wanted to do. Or business-wise, if we don't get a new client that we wanted to work with, okay, so that wasn't the right company for us, perhaps. Or, great, this has given us an opportunity to work with another client that's coming down the line that's going to be better. Or, is there something to learn from this because we didn't show our impact well enough, for example, and then we take the learning away from it, which means that it was a good experience. So it's that kind of thing that is reframing. Seeing everything as a learning experience kind of flows through that. By nature, I love taking risks, and to stop me from becoming anxious about any risks that I take, I literally kind of take the bull by the horns, or metaphorically take the bull by the horns, and I just plow everything into it so that I know that I've left nothing behind. It'll either be successful or we'll have learned a hell of a lot from it, and they're both positive things. And the last one is mottos. There are 3 mottos that I actually really live by. Either I found those mottos because I live by them, or I live by them because I don't know why, but they really resonated with me. So one is, you can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf. And that I love, and I think it's so resonant for the times that we're in now. The second one is that you'll miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. So for me, that's go for it. Let's see what happens. That way you can't regret it. And the last one is that an incredibly wonderful new beginning is often disguised as a really terrible ending. So for me, that's really, like, it really helps me to think about, it's okay, this too shall pass. It's the disguise that's happening here. It's awful, but it's really the back end, if you like, of something that's going to be wonderful. And so
yeah, you learn the most about yourself during the tough times, right? For sure. I guess on that note, and you spend a lot of time with founders who are in very, very tough situations. They're scaling super rapidly, often out of their comfort zone. I guess, how often do you see those people wrestling with inner confidence? Looking from the outside, I always think they're completely radiating it, but that might not be true. So I'm interested to understand that. And does it get better as people become more senior?
I'll start with the second part of that question first. The answer is no, it doesn't get better. In fact, I think there's something in, and it's not, and this part isn't necessarily seniority, it could be age as well, but I think actually you perhaps start losing a little bit of confidence as well, in that you start to realize that what you thought you knew, you didn't know, or there's just all of these things that you're discovering that, and therefore you think you know less than you actually do, which can really cause problems with inner confidence in that regard. So inner confidence, when it's at play, I guess could be really, it could be called the imposter, and we talk about the imposter syndrome, and there is not one person that I know, if I don't open up and share with them, that they don't have similar stories. Absolutely not one. There is no one that says to me, I am positively confident all of the time and I have never not been confident. It just doesn't exist. So I think it's really helpful in actually just knowing that. Founders of the businesses we work with, some of them have never been there, done that. The capability is limited. They're generally action oriented, but sometimes they don't know what they're doing. So they seek kind of expert advice. I see it absolutely everywhere. And the more senior you get, it doesn't get better. You sometimes get better at handling it, because handling it, I think, is a skill. And what's wonderful about a skill is that you can learn it, and therefore you can get better at handling it.
And just a follow-up question from that, because the imposter syndrome, and I'm going to talk about this in a moment, can be a positive sometimes as well, because it propels us on. But for some people in the audience today, they have gone through particular hardship over these last few months with COVID-19, with job losses, with a busy job market, and as in lots of people looking and going, that rejection going to the core of who they were, which was before this kind of happy, successful, and doing what they're doing. What advice would you give them to, I guess, not let imposter syndrome now take over, to stay strong in that core?
Yeah, it's really hard because sometimes if you feel overwhelmed by emotion, to be able to think through things in the way that you might think of them when you're not overwhelmed by emotion is very different. And what's happening at the moment is that from a neuroscientific perspective, your amygdala is hijacked, and it's responsible in your brain to detect fear, and it's a survival mode. So actually what happens when that is inflamed, particularly when you're frightened or emotional or scared or whatever it might be, is that your cerebral cortex at the front of your brain can't function in the way that it normally would, which is the rational, logical part of your thinking. So the best thing to do, and I have done this a number of times, is to speak to your imposter as if it's a person, if you can, and to say, "Oh, hello, imposter. What are you doing here?" And really, and you could write it as a script, actually, if you liked, and kind of be a script writer if you feel uncomfortable talking to yourself about it. But I've done it before, and if it's your emotion, for example, if you're feeling sad or betrayed because of the incredible work that you've done for this business and they've let you go, and it hasn't been a particularly good letting go, if that makes sense, you could say, "Oh, betrayal, you've come to visit. Why are you here?" And then it's actually, "Oh, well, because I did all of this hard work and all of this stuff, and I've been let go and I'm really angry about it. Oh, tell me about the hard work that you did, betrayal. And well, I did this and I did this and I did this. Oh, wow, that's some really amazing work. You must have learned a whole lot of new skills during that time. What did you learn?" Well, I learned this and I learned this and I learned this. Oh, that's amazing. What kind of business might like to benefit from those skills, of all of these incredible things that you've learned that you've now got the opportunity to take elsewhere? So it's that kind of conversation, and it might take a few goes. You might have to write it down and revisit it a few times, but it actually really works. And then betrayal eventually is like, "Oh, I'm out of here. Like, I'm no longer feeling betrayed. I've got some opportunity ahead of me."
I love that. It also allows you to separate almost your logical self to be its own character and have its own strength away from these other characters. But it also gives betrayal a voice as well, which is important. We all need to feel a bit sorry for ourselves and things that are not going so well also. I love that. That's great. I've got lots of scripts coming up. Mica, I was interested to hear about imposter syndrome for you, because you're coaching a lot of type A personalities, shall we say. Have you ever seen it work very positively? And the second part of that question is, when does it become damaging?
Yeah, very good question, actually. And yes, I have seen it positive, both in myself and actually some of the clients that I'm working with. And I guess, like with all things, what we learn is they're double-edged swords, really. And every single strength of ours, it has a different side that will play against us. So it's all about developing that awareness and knowing when and how to use that weapon. So the example that comes to mind of a client who's actually lack of confidence in their professional status had made them more content and fact focused. So what it means is that when they would have to present something or speak about something, they made sure that they relied on facts and that they researched the hell out of everything that they did. And actually, because of that, because there wasn't the danger normally when we're so kind of tend to be so confident in kind of what we're saying, we can kind of hype our own hype, believe our own hype. And actually, there's a danger that when we feel that other people believe blindly in what we say, it tricks us into believing in more. But on the opposite side, actually, a little bit of imposter syndrome, or in this case, it kind of imposes you to verify and really justify your point of view. And in that manner, they ended up gaining when they looked back over their lifetime, they realized they gained a lot of respect from people, from the fact that whenever they talked about something, they really knew what they were talking about. And it made them grow as a person.
Yeah, so they almost overcompensated and became far more competent as a consequence. That's
Exactly.
That's great. That's exactly what you want imposter syndrome to do, turn it into an advantage. When do you think it does become negative? When do you spot that it's crossed the line?
Yeah. So I guess it becomes negative when it's really holding you back, right? When it's holding you back from doing justice to yourself in meetings or interviews, when it's holding you back from taking on opportunities, which may be challenging to start, but may enable you to grow. When it's holding you back from developing meaningful relationships, because those insecurities and those anxieties that the imposter syndrome can cause are kind of taking over. So when that inner critic inside your head is just on a daily basis telling you, what's wrong with you? You know, how could you let this happen?
Yeah.
You know, if you continue like this, you'll inevitably fail. You know, you're going to be found out. If you hear this voice on a daily basis, this is when it's starting to be harmful, because it's starting to hold you back, starting to hold you back from, you know, feeling happy and really fulfilled. So just again, developing that awareness. And as Anouk was saying, actually, rather than hating that inner critic, and that's a lot of work that I do with clients, it's an exercise called befriending your inner critic, and really understanding that the role of that inner critic is to first of all hold you accountable to your goals and also protect you from dangers. But the way that the inner critic expresses themselves is not always in the most kind of productive way. So almost developing that translation mechanism and turning that self-criticism into constructive feedback. But again, doing it by befriending it and actually exactly like Anouk is saying, just saying, hello, you there? How are you? I know you're there. And like talking to it, giving it a voice and understanding that we are all made of all these different sides. We're such complex humans. We have all these voices. So one exercise that I do with clients is actually helping them identify these voices, imagine them, describe them, and give them each a name. And it's really quite fascinating.
I'm loving this script writing technique that both of you have come to. So that's definitely going to be a big take away. Just to speak to the audience for a second, there is a Q&A function on Zoom, and we will be leaving plenty of time for questions at the end in about 15-20 minutes. So if you want to get your questions into Mica and Anouk, please do so now as they're talking. Just have a think about anything that you'd like to talk about with regards to resilience, inner confidence, imposter syndrome, or any other topic that's coming up as we talk. So I'm actually going to take a little bit of a tangent now, but I think it does feed into, you know, this building oneself up. Mica, you spent time training as a chef, and nutrition, I know, has been at the heart of your sense of well-being and how you speak to your clients as well. Can you talk to us a bit more about that, why it is so important for us?
Yeah, great question. You see, how we feel in our body has a great impact on our sense of confidence. And we know that, right? If we feel good in our body, if we feel, you know, energetic and we feel we look good, it gives us a sense of confidence. And it also impacts our physical resilience, which is very interconnected with our emotional resilience. But actually, it goes even beyond that. So firstly, our mood is in fact regulated to a certain extent by the nutrients we consume. So some of the macro and micronutrients in our diet can boost our mood, and if absent from our diet can actually make us feel anxious and less focused and less happy. So such nutrients include protein that are rich in the amino acid tryptophan, and also things like iron, folate, selenium. So consuming things like whole grains and beans and pulses and oily fish and nuts and seeds and white poultry and eggs, a lot of kind of protein, but also the green leafy veggies. So all the kind of healthy food that we know we are meant to kind of eat can really give us those nutrients that can affect our mood. And then secondly, our mood is also regulated by what is known as our microbiome. So those tens of trillions of microorganisms residing in our gut. So it turns out we have a whole nervous system in our gut, over 100 million neurons. And we also have all these microorganisms, which effectively manage those neurons and the neurotransmitters. So we need to nourish that gut-friendly bacteria, because if we don't, it can really make us feel sad for no reason, simply because from our physiological perspective. So making sure that we nourish that bacteria by feeding it things that it likes, which is fiber. It just munches on fiber, and hence, and that's its food. And secondly, throwing in some more bugs by either consuming cultured or fermented foods, like yogurt, kefir, or taking probiotics as supplements.
So it quite literally goes to the core of building one's mood, which I guess goes to the core of building that confidence in the first place. Anouk, I wanted to talk to you about this gap between, because, we instinctively know that person who has all of that overconfidence, almost bravado, but that they're really kind of insecure and struggling themselves. You can almost feel it, and we instinctively know it's not the most attractive combination. Can you talk to us about why that is from your kind of professional perspective? Why do we have that reaction to the gap we feel in those people?
As in why we find it unattractive? Exactly,
yeah.
I think it comes down to being able to relate to those people. If you're either not feeling particularly confident or are just averagely confident, and someone comes up and throws themselves around and they seem like this amazingly confident person and very rah and all the rest, it's quite off-putting, because you, as an individual, you don't necessarily know how to engage on that level. And actually it takes a bit of time. I've met a few big bravado people in my time, and it actually takes you, which is opposite to what you learn in terms of mirroring people. It takes you to be very much the opposite before they calm down, and you have to almost get them to mirror you. So if they're all, jacked up and dancing around, you kind of need to sit down calmly and allow them to kind of calm down, because it's obviously kind of either a show or a first impression, or they're trying to demonstrate something. And then you as an individual need to take that first step in terms of behaving in the way that you want them to behave, so that they mirror your behavior and they feel, oh, it's okay, I'm actually safe. Often people who are overly confident, it tends to be because they're actually inside not at all confident. So they're acting. The whole fake it till you make it piece, which actually drives me crazy, is part of it.
But the fake it till you make it, it's interesting that you raised that, because the fake it till you make it is big in our industry, right? In tech, it's huge. It's always fake it till you make it, fake it till you make it. In the job market, it's fake it until you make it. During the last financial downturn, I specialized in financial services, hedge funds, investment banks, and that was terrible. It was a terrible time for them. And that culture, it was very much fake it till you make it. So everybody was turning up to interviews. It was like, whoa. And you could feel the fear, but they'd almost been programmed to just show confidence all the time. What advice would you, is it the right strategy to go down when you're looking for a job? And if not, can you explain what to perhaps do instead?
Yeah, I don't think it's the right strategy personally, because I actually think if you're faking it, and I don't mean, having a sip of water and kind of standing up tall. I mean, making a whole lot of stuff up and looking confident in doing it. If you're actually faking it and you don't get the job, it is even worse for your confidence. And you end up thinking that you didn't fake it enough. So you keep kind of going down this line. Actually, if you're going for a role, don't fake it. Try and make it. It doesn't have to be you don't have to get the job first, obviously, but try and make it first. So for example, the first thing to do is prepare. Like, you can't prepare enough. And actually, as to what Mica was saying, use that imposter syndrome, use that to your advantage, and do more research than you would have ever done. And this happened when I went for a job in the fintech space, well before I started my own business as chief people officer. And I didn't know about fintech, didn't understand the whole kind of VC space, didn't really know about the business. It was obviously in the financial sector, which I hadn't been involved in before. I'd been involved in the tech space. So I researched, and I learned so much through that process about the bigger context beyond just the business, that when I was in the interview, it wasn't that I was able to answer their questions. I mean, I was, but I was able to ask some really good parallel context questions, which eventually, when I did get the job, they told me it was because of my broader depth of knowledge that was the reason I actually got the role. So prepare is really important. And if you don't get the job, you've learned a hell of a lot, and learning is always winning in my book. The second thing is it's never personal. So if you don't get the job, that's okay. It's like not winning the client sometimes, that it wasn't the right one for you and there is another one. And that can feel, unfortunately, if it's repetitive, that can feel really hard time and time again. But that's where it's really nice to do a little bit of self-reflection work around actually what kind of work, what kind of job, what kind of business do I want to be working for? Because that could help you not just apply for everything, but apply for what might be more right for you. And it's all feedback, so it's not personal. So if you're lucky enough to receive feedback through an interview process, often businesses don't, or they say they were better candidates, which is fine. It's probably true, but it's not helpful. Then it's about their needs, not what necessarily you need. So if, for example, you receive feedback, not even through an interview process, but through any times, or sometimes you can seem a little bit too aggressive, right? What it is that they need from you is someone who's calm and gentle around them. So it's about their need and not yours. And when you reframe feedback like that, it can be really helpful to understand that as well. And the last one is stand out. I used to read, I don't know how many CVs, but 30 seconds I would spend max on them. And it's so unfair to the person that spent how many days creating a CV thinking it was good when it just gets looked at. It has to stand out one way or another. Either it's particular words that are bolded, that are really important words, not paragraphs, but just individual words that you want to hit someone in the face with, or you prepare some kind of deck or an infographic and get creative, but somehow you have to stand out, particularly in this job market where there are going to be more people in it. So they're my.
I think that's some really great advice there. Thank you. And we'll be getting all of these points out in the write-up at the end. So don't worry about making notes. We've got some great questions coming up. So please do write some more. We'll be getting to them in about 10 minutes or so. Mica, I want to move on to you for a second. We talked a little bit about stress, and stress can be, quite damaging to one's sense of kind of self and inner confidence. But we also instinctively know through these conversations and over the last 5 weeks that it's hugely beneficial to learn from stress to become more resilient. Right. Can you talk to us a bit about that? Because initially you were helping people with stress, and then you were like, actually, no, we need to shape this, run with it. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, very interesting, actually. When I started to do coaching, it was much more focused around stress management. And I actually realized that the more you would talk, just by simply talking to people about stress, it made them stressed, right? So I was like, right, okay, how do I reposition this in a way that actually, helps them, empowers them, and helps them just embrace it, right? So I started talking about this concept of harnessing stress, like actually embracing it and harnessing it in the same way that we were talking about the imposter syndrome. And so a while back, I came across this lady called Kelly McGonigal, who wrote a book called The Upside of Stress that I really recommend. She's a psychologist and professor at Stanford. And she gave me the definition of stress that most resonated with me, which was the fact that stress is what arises when something you care about is at stake. So going back to what I was saying, the more things you have in life that you care about, the more likely you are going to have stressful events coming your way. And then upon kind of reflection of that, I thought, hang on, but the more things we have that we care about, surely the happier we are. So by this token, having stressful situations in our life shouldn't preclude us from feeling happy and being motivated and performing well, because the two seem to come together. So I was like, okay, so stress isn't always that bad. And at the heart of the matter is literally how we respond to it. And this is where things actually get even more interesting when I started digging into the science of it. Turns out that, we've been kind of taught that there's the fight or flight response, right? And stress is so bad, and the fight or flight response that is activated at a prolonged period of time is damaging. Turns out there's another stress response that we have, which is called the challenge response. And so there's a difference between feeling challenged about something and feeling threatened. And the difference is, does your brain perceive that you have enough resources to deal with the demands of the situation at hand? And if your brain perceives that, then you activate a challenge response. Or if it perceives that the demands exceed your resources, then you feel threatened. And turns out that our body then changes, the chemistry in our body and our behavior changes completely. So during a challenge response, our heart actually has a stronger beat, pumping out more blood, very similarly as it does during physical exercise. And we feel energized, we feel confident, as opposed to feeling fearful and self-doubting. And we secrete also a very different cocktail of hormones. So we actually secrete some hormones which are much more, they enable growth rather than, so more anabolic rather than catabolic. And also we have a greater attention span, and we have an ability to think sharply. So that's all. Turns out that even being in a state of flow is not actually a state of relaxation.
Actually putting ourselves under a bit of pressure now and again is a good thing for helping us develop as people and develop that resilience and sense of inner confidence as well. Because every time you learn that you can handle it, I guess you become more and more confident. I love it.
Absolutely that. And also the interesting thing is, when you feel anxious, it's much harder to turn it into feeling calm. It's much easier to twist it on its head and feel excited about it. Yeah. So using that stress, thinking of it as simply a source of energy, because it is simply a response that helps us rise to many challenges. So if you're just about to run into an interview and you're feeling super anxious, or, I used to feel this the first times I used to do workshops, just feeling super anxious, flip it on its head and feel, hey, this is just my body generating a bunch of energy to help me rise to this challenge. Instead, try to focus on your resources and try to get yourself kind of pumped up and excited about this opportunity. And even if it doesn't turn out, as Anouk was saying, there's going to be a learning there.
Love it. Thank you, Mica. That was really great. Anouk, talking about because we've got some businesses in the audience as well, and managers. If you are managing and leading somebody who's wrestling with this, imposter syndrome, they're kind of struggling to build that sense of inner confidence, what advice have you and the team at Unleashed given to help those managers manage effectively in those scenarios?
Yeah, if you recognize it in somebody in your team, you obviously have a level of emotional intelligence, which is really important to have to be able to deal with situations like that. So the first thing to do is to listen to that person and talk to them. And perhaps if they're struggling with kind of sharing their own experiences, tell them what it is that you're seeing and why it is that you think that this might be the case, and ask them to correct you if you're not correct, or to help you to understand why, so that you can support them. And if you're not right, then they'll tell you you're not right and the reasons why. When it comes to, and this is what Mica was saying is really important, when it comes to inner confidence in the workplace, if people are feeling really anxious and stressed, it's because they feel overly challenged by the work that they've got. They're not being allowed to incrementally improve for one reason or another. So you sit with them and you talk about the work that they're doing. You talk about what they enjoy, what they're enjoying, what they're not enjoying, what they're finding positively challenging, what's creating anxiety in them, what they're having difficulty with, and so on and so forth. And then you help them with it. So you make sure that they feel supported by you. So for example, if it's a particular piece of work, you give them time and you collaborate on it and you work through it together, and you ask them questions and you get their answers and you incorporate their opinions. And just through that process of actually being able to work with you on something, they will start to feel more confident. Then you give them something of a similar nature and you get them to lead on it, and you might be in the background, and then they'll feel even more confident, and you give lots of praise and lots of really positive feedback. And if there's any negative feedback to give, or constructive feedback, however you want to call it, if there's any of that feedback to give, try and coach it out of them. Ask them to reflect on the work and what they may do better or differently next time, rather than you giving the negative feedback when someone doesn't feel confident, because they will have already been beating themselves up about it. So to do that, and it'll build their confidence over time. If they feel that they've got your back and your support, they will start to feel much more confident immediately.
And do you think it works the other way around as well? So if you are an employee and this is something that you're wrestling with, you know, be honest with your manager, tell them that this is something that's going on with you, because then at least they have the information to respond appropriately and support you. I guess it's a tough conversation to have, for sure.
It's a tough conversation, particularly if your manager's not necessarily that way inclined or hasn't kind of demonstrated vulnerability in that way before,
yeah.
And you feel that you're going to be judged. And judgment is kind of not what anybody needs. So sometimes if you can speak to your manager about it, great, because they're in a really good position to be able to help you. If you can't, sometimes a colleague, definitely a colleague if you can't speak to your manager, because they're in a really good position to help you, or a coach or someone externally, but talk about it and get some help. That's really important, because otherwise it just gets worse and worse.
Understood. I'm going to sorry, go on.
May I contribute? Actually, one of the things that I noticed, and I remember from my own experiences, when you're, and I'm thinking of employees, when you're really stressed, you really, really struggle to communicate, because you yourself, as Anouk was explaining, you're in your amygdala, you're not thinking rationally. So actually in this case, I've actually developed for myself, and I encourage my clients to kind of use a framework of questions. So first of all, to take at least 1 hour weekly for self-reflection, and to have a almost preset set of questions that you go through in order to start breaking down what are the things that are not working for you, so that you can have that clarity for yourself, and you're able to communicate that more clearly to your manager or to your employer, because it is really hard. Like, I remember being asked when I was feeling totally overwhelmed, how can I help? I could not say how someone would help, because I was in this sea of overwhelm and anxiety and kind of fear. So sometimes it is just to keep in mind, like, don't feel bad if you don't quite know how to communicate. Just maybe in times of calm, prepare yourself and kind of write for yourself a list of questions that you're going to ask yourself in times of kind of lack of confidence and anxiety.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Mica. Yeah, go on, Anouk. You're going to come back.
That's really stimulated another thought, actually, and that's a brilliant one, Mica. There was something that I spoke to one of my team the other day who was really scared about an appointment that was coming up that she had, and I called it a fear letter, basically. And the idea was that she had to write a letter to herself, kind of before this appointment, about what emotion she was feeling and then why. So it goes back to kind of naming the emotion and kind of writing all the reasons why down, and that reduced the anxiety because it was out of her head and it was on paper. And the other thing that's really good is the 7-minute self-coach, which is you stick your phone on for the timer on for 7 minutes, you write down the problem at the top, and then you don't stop writing until the buzzer goes off. I've done this many times to solve any problem, and there is always an answer on that piece of paper by the end of 7 minutes, without fail.
Brilliant. That's such a good technique, one I've never heard of, and I will definitely be taking that away. 7-minute coach, everyone. Right, we're going to move on to audience questions now. So this is, sometimes my inner critic becomes quite dangerous. The negative voices become a spiral, and it's really hard to step away from what they're saying. Any suggestions for managing that if you're maybe not as easily able to give your inner voice a name and ask it questions? That's a great but difficult question. Mica, do you want to take that first?
Sure. So when it comes to the inner critic and kind of tackling our inner critic, I would say it comes down so much to developing self-compassion. And actually, actually, there's a lady called Kirsten Neff, for whoever asked the question. I will share a link, and I love her. She's done a whole PhD in the kind of space of self-compassion, and there's so much evidence around it. So what does that actually mean? It means the opposite of self-criticism. So learning to, rather than attacking or berating yourself for your kind of shortcomings, offering yourself warmth and unconditional acceptance, like you would to a child or a friend. So, for example, a practice that comes to mind is, how would you treat a friend? So, and again, I'll provide a link. There is again online, you can find exactly step by step how would you go about doing this practice. But it goes down, how would you treat a friend? And then you see, how do you treat yourself? So in times of when this inner critic comes out, you can try to apply, how would you speak to a friend or to a child? And so I struggled for years with this concept of self-acceptance, like that unconditional self-acceptance, given the desire to kind of be better and grow. But how the science of self-compassion explains it and reconciles it is that the fact that self-acceptance doesn't mean that we refrain from evaluating our behavior. We still evaluate our behavior, but we separate evaluating our behavior from evaluating the self. So as an example, for example, if you said something in an interview that you wish you hadn't, right? You could say, oh, you're so bad at interviews, right? Or you could say, expressing yourself in that way didn't really do yourself justice, right? So you're evaluating the behavior rather than the self. And, when you focus on the behavior, it's so much more productive because you don't expend that energy on guilt and regret. And it's also so much more doable. I can amend my behavior.
Totally. It's that is a very important distinction, really subtle, but important. It's less attacky. I'm going to just chime in with something I've started doing recently that's been kind of transformational. And anyone who was on last week would know this already, but I'm very good at tuning into the negative voice as well. I think we are actually programmed that way. There was a good reason for it. There isn't a particularly good reason for it now. And at the end of the day, I force myself to write down the wins, and it can be even stupid things like I made a really nice lunch, or I ran, or even like the personal things as well. But I write those all down, and I actually ignore the negative stuff because I know that already. But just building up that list every day actually is a nice conversation with myself to tune into that positive voice. So I found that really helpful. We've got one more question, and Anouk, I'm going to give this one to you. Do you have any quick hacks for when you need a confidence boost fast?
Oh, that's an interesting one. I'm not the kind of person that kind of gorilla beats my chest and kind of stands up. I think from a quick hack perspective, it's maybe less about a boost of confidence, but more as a calming down. Is like a drink of water, like, is absolutely so calming. It's incredible. If you have the time, a short walk around the block is really helpful as well. I think also what I've done before, and it's not so much about building confidence again, but it's kind of relieving or lessening the stress, is there have been times where I've gone to do facilitations or workshops or webinars where I've felt for some reason really, really nervous and been really scared. So what people have said, or good luck, or you'll smash it, this, that, or the other, actually doesn't help me, because it's more like, oh, what if I don't? Like it starts to build up. And someone said to me once, oh, go and have fun. And I was like, oh, yeah, I can just go and have fun. And that actually really helped. And from then on, like even before this webinar, I was like, well, I'm going to go and have fun for an hour and just share.
Yeah, kind of like we've done today.
Yeah, exactly. And that really helps with confidence as well.
What are your final question for you both? What are your takeaway books or podcasts that you might recommend for someone looking to work on self-esteem, self-confidence, and resilience generally? Mica?
I'm just trying to. I'm actually going to open my Audible just to quickly. You
okay,
took me on the spot. Definitely.
No, sorry. No, Anouk, what about you?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I haven't been one necessarily for kind of reading kind of self-help type books or finding specific podcasts in that. However, there are some podcasts or people that I follow that have had guests on that have spoken about confidence and imposter syndrome and all the rest, and they've been actually really good. So I'm trying to think about them now. Deliciously Ella is one of them as well. She often has guests. What is it called?
I love that.
The Food Medic is another one. I have interest also in nutrition as it happens, so I listen to a lot of nutrition related podcasts. So the Food Medic, Food for Thought, and Eat, Sleep, Work, Repeat is a great one for that as well from a podcast perspective. And then books is just generally wider reading to help increase knowledge or challenge thinking. Trying to find something that challenges your perspective, I think, is really good for kind of generally building confidence as well. The last thing I'm going to say on that is if you Google the emotions wheel and you're trying to identify, if you struggle with identifying, and this actually goes back to one of the questions that was asked, if you struggle to identify your emotions, this is a massive wheel that has hundreds of emotions named on it. And it starts with the basic ones like happy, sad, angry, and then it kind of goes into more detail in naming them as it goes out. And it can be really handy if you're struggling to name them, to have a look on paper and to say that one, and that one, because they'll spring out at you, and then you start to talk to them.
Brilliant, love it. It goes to the heart of the naming in our script, my script that I'm going to be writing. That's brilliant. Thank you, Anouk. And Mica.
Yeah, so I was actually just thinking, interestingly, one of the things that gives me confidence and is actually the element of common humanity. So feeling really connected with everyone else and understanding that no one is perfect and that we all struggle and we all have issues. And the more I was practicing as a coach, the more I kind of understood, and I was seeing how everyone struggles very similar issues. So actually, more recently, I was listening to Marcus Aurelius's meditations, which is brilliant. And actually, what's fascinating is that these ancient philosophers had so much wisdom. So in a way, because you kind of understand, oh, that's just human nature, and those are the things that we struggle with, and this is what we can do, it kind of gives you that confidence. There's a book that I mentioned, The Upside of Stress, which I think is brilliant. Again, another kind of a really great book. And also more recently, I came across a book called Taming Tigers by Jim Lawless. And actually, there was I remember one quote from that book that sat with me, which was the fact that imperfection is not the barrier, seeking perfection is the barrier. And that comes down to the heart of the imposter syndrome. The sooner we stop our compulsion and obsession with wanting to be perfect and comparing ourselves to others, the faster we can just free ourselves and really just be ourselves, our imperfect, beautiful and wonderful selves.
What a note to finish on. Thank you so much to both of you. That's absolutely wonderful. And to the audience, Mica and Anouk's social handles are in the Zoom webinar chat right now, and we will get that out to you as well. So at Mica Vaipan and at Oz_Anouk, and myself at Romanie Thomas, and we're at Juggle Job. So I just want to say thank you very much to everyone in the audience. It's been an amazing 5 weeks learning about resilience and how we can become so and come out of this crazy 2020 much stronger than ever before. And thank you to our most amazing speakers today. I've learned a ton. I will get all of the resources that were mentioned today out to you in a follow-up. And this will be available on the YouTube channel as well, which is also in the chat right now, as well as all of our social handles. As ever, if you have any feedback, please do get in touch. And it's been amazing getting to know you over the last 5 weeks. Thanks again, everyone, and have a lovely evening. Take care. Bye.
Thank you.